Hey, I'm Chase Adams. I build software for a living. And in this video, what I'm going to do is walk through how I would use this tool, which is Anthropic's Claude. It's an AI assistant to determine first a prompt that I can use for a project that I'm going to work on, and then to use that prompt to create the project as much as possible without writing code and having Claude do that for me. The goal of this is for me to really document how I use Claude for other people like you who are watching, to be able to also use Claude, especially if you don't have never used Claude or an AI tool like ChatGPT, or you have tried something like Claude or ChatGPT and you found that it didn't really do what you want it to do. So this will be maybe multiple videos that are a long walkthrough of the process of me using Claude. So to start with, what I want to do, something that I've noticed that I do a lot, is I might have a prompt that I want to reuse over and over again. This is an example. What I'm going to build here is going to be an example of that. And it'd be really nice for me to be able to have a chat interface, a lot like what Claude gives you for each of your individual threads, but where I can say I want to start a chat based on this particular little snippet, and then I want to give it some more context and let that conversation just happen. So what I want to do first is have a discussion with this particular assistant where the end goal is for us to generate a prompt that I can use for future assistants. So I'm going to describe the tool. So I'll say, I'm a software engineer who is wanting to build a brand new product. The goal of this product is to create snippets of prompts for users so that they can reuse their prompts as system prompts. So a system prompt, when you're using a tool like Claude or ChatGPT as through the API, there's a system prompt, which is what I say, this is, you are a assistant, or you are doing something for some person. And then there's the user prompt, which is, I'm the user and I say, I want to create a new piece of software. So what we want to do here is we want to be able to let the user create some system prompts that they can always start brand new with, and use those to have a conversation with an assistant. So the goal of this product is to create snippets. I have been building software. I know kind of what I want to use here. So I'm going to say this product will be built with the following technologies. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to use Next.js. I'm going to use Tailwind for CSS stuff. I want to use Supabase for database and authentication plus authorization with row level security. What else do I want to use here? I want to use Shadcn components. Deploy to Vercel. And then I also want to use Next.js's AI framework. Move this down here. Okay. I don't need to spell technologies right, but I'd like to. So what else do I need here? I'd like for you to help me create a clear system prompt that an AI assistant can use to help me build this product. The system prompt should be able to inform the AI assistant that of the technologies it should be constrained to and the goal of the product. So the next thing I'm going to do is say, I'd like you to ask me clarifying questions one at a time, no more than 10, that will help you determine, no more 10 questions total. We'll see if it does what it's supposed to. Determine the most clear prompt. When you think you have enough information, I'd like for you to return the prompt to me. All right, so I'm gonna hit enter. We'll see what happens. I understand you're looking to create a system prompt for an AI assistant to help you build a product for managing and reusing prompts. Before I craft the prompt, I'd like to ask you some clarifying questions. That's what I asked it to do. I asked one at a time. What specific features do you envision for storing and managing prompts in this product? I would like for the user to be able to write the prompt using Slate.js. I forgot that technology, so I'm going to add that here. The prompt will be stored in a database table and have a prompt ID, but have different versions, and each version will be able to link to its parent as a reference, or null if it's new. Managing. As far as managing prompts, I want to be able to allow the user to keep a list of prompts, and when they click one, it starts a new conversation. Okay, so I've just real quick to recap, I started out with this particular prompt. I was really clear about one question at a time, because if you don't tell it one question at a time, most of the time it'll just lob a bunch of questions at you. And for me, at the point that I see 10 questions, I'm like, I can't do this, I'm done. But if I get one question at a time, it's a lot easier for me to answer it to it and respond. So it's asked me a question. I'm going to answer. So thank you for detailed information. Helps clarify the structure and functionality you're aiming for. Let's continue with the next question. How do you envision the user interface for creating and editing prompts? Will there be any specific format options or templates available? I think right now I'm going to say unspecified for formatting and for templates. It's an MVP, which, if you are unfamiliar with that term outside of most valuable player, it's minimum viable product. So I want to build something quick and determine if it's useful. I don't necessarily want formatting templates, but maybe later I will. So let's just start with, give me the quickest thing possible. All right, so keep it simple for the MVP is a good approach. Let's move on to the next question. How do you plan to implement the conversation threads? Will they be stored in the database? And if so, how will they relate to the prompts? Yes, so I do want to store conversations in the database, and the conversations This is something I've been thinking about. The conversations should be able to have a reference to the initial prompt. I also think it's important to allow the user, and this may be scope creep, maybe I'm like getting outside of my MVP, but it's important to let the user create an initial prompt snippet and a subsequent message prompt snippet. So the goal of this is the initial prompt snippet should be able to stand on its own, and the subsequent prompt snippet should be able to give context that isn't just what the initial prompt would be. So as an example, I have this snippet that I wrote here. We're going to be creating a snippet that I want to be able to use. I don't want that snippet to be reused every time I have a conversation after the first prompt. I want to be able to have a second snippet that goes along with the system prompt. And that'll be more clear when I get into that later. Thank you for that clarification. It provides a good understanding of how you want to structure the relationship between prompts and conversation. Let's continue. Regarding the AI framework in Next.js, do you have any specific requirements or preferences for how it should be integrated? For example, are you planning to use streaming? Yes, we're using streaming. The Next.js AI prompt or AI framework allows for flexibility with providers and models, so I'm not worried about that. Not really worried about that part. Understood. Streaming is a good choice for responsiveness. Quick side note, if this is the first time that you're kind of experiencing a ChatGPT or Claude-like experience, or if you've experienced it before, when you see it scroll the text in, it's streaming. And the way that works is the server where this AI lives it has a little bit of the response. It sends that to the browser. The browser puts that on the page. The server sends another little snippet, and it keeps sending snippets. So as it comes through, you can see it feels a lot more like a conversation than if I were to write it, wait for a second, and then suddenly the text is on the page. It feels a lot more conversational, and that's a good reason to support streaming, is that even if it's faster to respond with this entire block of text, it still feels more human and more like you're having a conversation with this assistant. And I think that what's interesting about that is it feels like it makes it more comfortable, and it does start to feel more like you're talking to someone rather than that you're making a request to a server and the server is just sending back an entire block of text, and you have to read it all at once. All right, so how do you envision handling user authentication and authorization? Will there be different user roles or permissions for managing prompts and conversations? For the MVP, there's kind of two ways that you can handle this. Generally, you can have a user-based system where it's entirely users, or you can have a workspace/teams-based system where you would have an entirely different table that keeps the relationships of each of the individual users. In this case, because it's an MVP, I want to just support individual users having an account that has all of the users' snippets in it. I want to reduce the need for permissions, roles and permissions right now. And only a user who creates a snippet should be able to read, write, delete, update that snippet. All right, so we're on question 5. That's a clear and straightforward approach for the MVP. It simplifies authorization model significantly. Let's continue. Are there any specific features you want to implement for version control of prompts beyond the parent-child relationship I mentioned earlier? Right now I don't. Again, this is MVP. I just like to have that simple relationship, and I might even decide to get rid of that relationship to start with. Do you have any specific requirements for the user interface layout or design, considering you're using Tailwind CSS and Shadcn components? No, I don't think so. I think I want to have a standard chat-based view and the ability to tag a snippet. So as an example, I might want to tag a snippet as writing or blogging. And I'd say tags, I think it'll be easier than folders to start with, but I think that at least gives me a little bit to be able to filter, and that's kind of why I want to have something like tagging. So this is the ability to tag a snippet so that the user can filter their snippets and find them easily to get started. I also want to have an easy way for the user to find their conversations based on the snippet that started the conversation. Thank you for that insight. It gives a clear picture of the main interface elements you're considering. Let's address one more aspect. Regarding the deployment on Vercel, do you have any specific requirements for environment variables, serverless functions, or edge computing that should be considered in the system design? Right now it's an MVP. So I think most of the standard stuff that comes with a Vercel deployment is going to be fine for me. I will need environment variables for my providers, because I may want to use Anthropic or OpenAI. I'll add those as I need them. All right, so we got to question 8. Now we're at the end where it says, thank you for clarifying that. Given the information you provided, I believe we have enough details to create a focused system prompt for the AI assistant. Here's the prompt I've crafted based on our discussion. We'll look at it in a second. So it's created a document. So this is a thing that Claude does that's really cool, is it will create artifacts for you. So I could decide to download this particular artifact. I could publish it, which is sharing it, or I can copy the contents. So this system prompt encapsulates the key aspect of your project, including the tech stack, main features, and development constraints. It provides clear guidance for an AI assistant to help you build your MVP while staying within the specified scope. Is there anything you'd like me to modify or expand upon in this system? So now what we can do, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to move my face down here. So this is system prompt for prompt management MVP. You are an AI assistant. So remember earlier I mentioned that a system prompt usually starts with you are a. In this case, you're an AI assistant tasked with helping a software engineer build a minimum viable product for a prompt management system. Your role is to provide guidance, code snippets, and advice within the constraints of the specified technologies and requirements. Project goal, create a web application that allows users to create, store, and reuse prompt snippets, initiate conversations based on those snippets, and manage their prompt history. Tech stack is Next.js, including Next.js AI framework with streaming support. It'll be interesting to see whether or not it picks that up, because it is newer, and I'm not sure if Claude has access to it or if it's something that it's seen before, so we'll see. Tailwind, Supabase, Shadcn, Slate.js, Vercel. These are all things I asked for, which is great. So it talks about the key features, prompt management. Users can create and edit prompts using Slate.js editor. Prompts are stored in a database with versioning. Each prompt has a unique ID and can reference its parent. Users can tag prompts for easy filtering and discovery, conversation handling. Users can initiate new conversations, threads based on selected prompts. Conversations are stored in the database referencing the initial prompts, support for initial prompt snippets and subsequent message prompt snippets. So this all looks good to me. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy it. Now we're going to go into Claude again. Not calendar, Claude. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this all here. So you can see I've pasted it. And now what I want to do is say, I want you to build the login page for, actually let's start here. I want you to instantiate a new project with all of the required technologies. It is okay to leave the Next.js page, starter page. And that's it. We'll just start here. You should, at the end of your work, I should be able to download an artifact that has the all the files to start a Next.js project with. Based on the technologies I've requested. All right, and we'll see how that goes. So it might tell me that I need to install all of those technologies. So certainly I'll create a new Next.js project with the required technologies for the prompt management MVP. I'll set up the basic structure and configuration. So you can see here it's actually going through and creating bunch of different files. So we'll see how that ends up working, what will happen with this particular click to open code. But it's created this first file. So we'll look at this while the rest of this stuff goes. This creates the new Next project. So this is going to go through a process where it scaffolds out the project. Oh, let's go back. It installs dependencies, so Supabase, Slate. This is dependency for Shadcn somewhere. Oh, it's down here, okay. These are all Tailwind stuff. These are both Shadcn things, dependencies. I didn't ask it to do TypeScript, and I should have, but it looks like it automatically picked up that it should use some dev dependencies for types. Create next step. Let's ask it. So in this case, I don't know what it's done, but I'm going to do it again just to see. Can you redo that and make sure that it is TypeScript compatible? Oh, face in the way. Compatible. All right, so it's going to go through and redo that. So this would have required a ton of work to get up and running with if I were trying to do this from scratch by hand. So it's created, again, this separate file, which we'll have to see whether or not this will create each of those files when I download it. And then this is the creating the home page, as well as adding the prompt editor, layout, app. All right, so I'm going to go over here. So it says, certainly I recreate the project setup and components using TypeScript for better type safety and compatibility. I'll make sure all files use TypeScript and add necessary type definitions. So it's created each of these three things. This is the setup part. This is the setup part. This one, these look like the same. Thing. I don't know what happened with this one. Next.js TypeScript configuration. Go backwards. Show me this artifact. All right. Well, it looks like the artifacts got dropped in here, kind of weird. Let's see what happens with this one. All right, so I'll download in a second, but we set up the basic structure and you have a solid foundation to start building on. We'll see. So it tells me here what we've accomplished. We set up a Next.js project. So what we're going to do, I'm going to click on this one. So this is the Next.js TypeScript prompt management MVP. Let's go back to the one at the first time I did it, and let's see if it did it with TypeScript, because I don't think it didn't. Okay, great. So I asked it to do TypeScript. It's going to change that for me. So what we're going to do, these all look okay to me. It's important to not just randomly install stuff when a computer tells you to do it. But in this case, npx is a runner for npm. I know I've used create next app before. This is going to give it the name, and this is going to set it up as a TypeScript application. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to change into where I keep most of my projects. So I'm going to run npx create next app. Yes, it is okay to proceed. So it's going to install some packages. I would like to use ESLint. I would like to use Tailwind. Yes. Source. I actually did want to use source. Let's redo this. All right. Yes. 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 Yes, I want to use router. Would you like to customize the default? No, I'll use @ All right, so what this is doing for anyone who's new to programming or building stuff with JavaScript, it's creating all of the files that I need. It's going to install any dependencies. Let's see, can I do cursor? Code-r. Pretty sure this should open this in cursor still. Okay. Well, actually, so what I wanted to do, and it did tell me I need to do this, is change directories into my prompt MVP. All right, so now what I'm going to do, the code, I'm using cursor, but it's mapped to code. So in this case, I'm going to run code-r that reuses this window, and I want to open the directory that I'm in here, which is prompt management MVP. And you'll see it'll reload this window. Now I can see that I'm in the right directory. So I did that. All these dependencies look okay. So I'm going to just run this. You can see it's updated my package JSON. I'll do a git init. So git is version control. This allows us to keep track of our changes as developers. It also helps us to work on some changes, have some code that is our main code that we use, and merge those changes into the main code. Git init turns this directory that I'm in into a Git project. So now what I can do is I can say git add. So this will add all these new files that just created. You can see there's a git ignore that was created by the initial npx that I did, where I created the React app, or sorry, the Next.js app. So I've done a git add. Let's see. Actually, maybe it was already git initted. It was git log. So I'm gonna do git log here. it already did that. So it was already initialized. I should have checked that first. It doesn't really matter. Didn't do anything for me to attempt to reinitialize it. But Git, when it, or the create next app created, initialized this as a Git project. So it did the Git init for me. It did a Git add for all the things that were already there. It did Git commit, which I'll do in a second. You can see here, I've got this package file. This has all these new dependencies that I just added. And it's got all these dependencies that were added earlier. These really should have been down here. Element of PQRS, okay. Types belong in dev dependencies. If this is new for you, these aren't production things. They're not going to be used in production. It's just for me as I'm building. So I've added some new dependencies. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stage these changes. I could have also done that by doing git add dot in the command line. You can see it does the same thing. I'll do git commit -m. That's create a new commit with this message. And what I'm going to say is added initial dependencies. So the nice thing about this is if you do a git log, you can see this was the initial version of all the changes. So all of these files, with the exception of the ones that are grayed out, were a part of this code base, and they were committed, they were sealed into the code base at the moment that this commit was created. So I added a new commit. So if I do a git reset --soft head, what this is going to do is this will remove the commit that I just created, but it will leave the files as they changed. So you can see here, this is telling me there's no changes. I'll do a git reset. You can see over here, there's these two files that we were just looking at and that I had committed. So I'm gonna go back and commit those again. Cool, so we've done that part. Now I'm going to install Tailwind and initialize it. You'll see over here again, whenever you do an npm install, it updates your package JSON, or if you were to do yarn install, it would be in a different file, but it's the same concept. It's adding the dependencies to your dependency graph so that if someone else were to pull down this code base and run npm install, it would know, use all of these dependencies. It would also know to use what's in the package lock. So these are the specific dependencies that it should be using at the time that you do an install. It's a much larger file than the one that we're just looking at, the package JSON, but it has the entire list of dependencies all the way down. So you can see here, I just added some Tailwind dependencies. It also created this post CSS file and this Tailwind CSS file, or sorry, Tailwind config. Both of these are just to allow us to do things with Tailwind and other CSS dependencies. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to git add. You'll see these get moved into staged changes. Git commit -m. What's interesting, you could kind of use these comments that they leave here for each of these sections. So Shadcn is a component library, and it's really nice. It's a great, if you're trying to just get started, you don't want to have to like build out all of your own components. They have really good components out of the box, and they're all here. It's at ui.shadcn.com. And it has made things really easy for me, so I like using it. So I'm going to say install Shadcn. Actually, before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this command. So this initializes Shadcn. So before I had done anything, it was just a dependency. Now what you're going to see is it'll create a file over here called components.json. And this is how that particular dependency knows to look for the components that I'm going to install in a second, which I'll show. And then it adds a few things like this util for merging class names. And then it modified my globals.css to use that base color, which is slate. So it created all of these CSS variables that get used by those components I was just showing here. They're all like hooked in, which makes it, again, really easy. And I think what I'll do now is I'll say git add. You can see that I had already added these. I'd already staged these changes for Shadcn and the package dependencies for the package lock. Now I'm going to add everything to do with Shadcn so far, and this is just for getting Shadcn installed and initialized. I'm going to do git add dot. I'm going to do git commit -m add and initialize Shadcn. Great. So you can see they disappear from this staged list that we're just looking at. They're still there in my files, but now if I do a git log again, we can go through and see I added Shadcn, I installed Tailwind. Before that, I added my initial dependencies and then the initial commit from create next app. So this is the last thing we're going to do for installing. I'm going to do this npx Shadcn UI, add each of these components. So npx runs a command, and in this case what it's doing is it's looking at this Shadcn dependency, and when it calls that, there is a subcommand called add that it will add that component from Shadcn, which is also in the node dependency. Sorry, it's in the node npm ecosystem. But what's going to happen is rather than it just doing the installation of a brand new package, it's going to create these components in my project. So if I go here, source components, you can see it's just created button, input, and text area. It's might not be obvious except for there's this U. The U in this means that it's a brand new file, it's untracked. So what I want to do, now that I've added these, I'm going to do a git add again. I'm going to do a git commit, add initial Shadcn components. Oh, that's not what I wanted. There we go. All right, so now those are in my project. You can see that U has gone away, so now these are being tracked. If I were to go in here and make a new line change, that doesn't matter. But if I did something like this and added some spacing, you can see it has an M for modified. And if I go over here into my source control changes, I can see that it's like reordered some of these dependencies, and then that space that I added has been added. So I'm going to revert that because I don't want any of these changes. And now that is the very first piece to this. So I wish that this part worked. Let's look at this one. That's so interesting. I'm not sure what happened here, that got lost. But what we can do, I feel like there's important stuff in here. So I'm going to say, it looks like it didn't load. Can you recreate that? Let's see what happens. All right, so now it's got like this next config. It changes the next config to React strict mode. So I'm gonna just look at next config. Let's download this file because I don't actually know what happens. Okay, great. That's not actually what I would have wanted. I would have wanted this to be like a directory with file as tsconfig, but what we can do, what would have also been nice would have been if it had told me, here's a patch for this file, you can just apply it. So I'm going to open this next config, and it's really just this react strict mode. And that's just saying that like we want the runtime to be strict mode compliant. So this is mainly for the fact that we want to keep everything really tight. If we do, actually, let's do this. This is another really interesting way to be able to leverage a tool like an AI assistant, because you could go Google it and then you have to go look for search results. But what you could also do is you can copy this and say, I want you to explain what this Next.js config is doing. All right, so it's saying the first line is a TypeScript comment that provides type information. Next config object is defined with one property, and then React strict mode. This enables React strict mode for the entire application. Strict mode is a development mode feature in React that helps identify potential problems in an application. It activates additional checks and warnings for all components inside it. This is going to make it easier down the road if there's a problem to not have problems, instead of like not using strict mode where you might have missed something through not having additional checks or warnings. So this again is like, you can use ChatGPT or Claude for these kinds of things, and I do think this is a very useful way to get the information you want. It's not great for whoever wrote the content that was used to train this data, but it is great for me as a user to be able to, find the information I need without having to go and search through Google results. All right, so my next config is good. I'm gonna just delete that part. Now I'm gonna open my TS config, and let's see. I think what I'll do here, I'm gonna leave the include and exclude because I don't want to really mess with those. These were created by the Next app. Having them created by that makes me think they're as right as they will be. The only thing it looks like that's missing from there is this next types being included. So, I think it's better just to leave it. Although this regular expression, or this pattern rather, should still match this. So, except for maybe if it's the dot directory, I'm not sure why it's there, but it might be something interesting to look at. Actually, again, you can take this, go over here, take that config. Why is .next types included in one and not the other? And this information, you do need to make sure that the things that it responds with is accurate. So you can always go look this up on Google later. Also, as you learn and as you become more proficient in what you're doing, you do start to recognize when it's making something up and when it's telling you the truth. But it's a good way to start out with trying to figure out why something is the way that it is. So in this case, it's saying it's related to how Next.js handles TypeScript types, particularly for newer versions of Next.js. So this is a more traditional TypeScript configuration. This is the old one. And then this new one, it includes everything else and TypeScript files in the Next types directory and its subdirectories. The reason for including it is related to Next 13 and later versions, particularly when using App Router and these new versions. Next.js generates additional TypeScript declaration files during development and build time. These files are placed in this directory. So it sounds like what's actually happening is there's these types that you need. So I guess I should have pointed out we're editing the TS config. So this is the TypeScript configuration file. And include is which files absolutely need to be used for the TypeScript configuration. And it's possible I guess it ensures, so it's good to have it there, but it ensures that these dynamically generated types are recognized by TypeScript, providing better checking and auto-completion. So all these types get generated in the .next directory. .next, if you may have noticed earlier, is not here yet because I haven't run my Next server, but as soon as I do, it will exist, and it's not managed by Git. It is Git ignored. So what happens is these files, type files, get generated in the .next directory, but they aren't created in such a way that they end up in your code base for your Git repository. So it probably helps keep it a little cleaner. All that said, what I wanted to do here was copy the compiler options. Let's see, I'd already done that. What is missing? Plugins. So I might leave plugins. We'll just go through one by one. Lib is the same. There's no target, so maybe we'll not include that. See what happens. Loud.js. Most of these force consistent casing and file names. Let's add that one. Let's see what that one does. So one thing you can do with TypeScript, which is really nice, is you can hover over these config options and it'll tell you what that config option does. In this case, it's saying ensure that casing is correct in imports, and you can go see what that means over here. One of the reasons that this could be problematic is if you are on an operating system that doesn't, it's not case sensitive. So Mac, for example, is case insensitive. You could have file manager and file manager, both of these. You could have this be the file name and reference it this way in your import, and it'll totally work. Then once you get on a case sensitive system like Linux, it will break, and especially if you don't have this force consistent casing and file names, it's very easy to have a bug where you have these mismatched, and your Linux server, or maybe you're running some kind of checks for your before deployment for continuous integration, and the server will say, hey, this file doesn't exist, and you look at it and you see it on your machine, and you're like, it does exist, it's right there, but it's the wrong file name. And your computer, if you're on a Mac, will be totally happy to serve that file as this file name. A Linux machine will not. So this is a great TypeScript property to have, just because I've been burnt by this. It took me like 2 or 3 days with another developer who swore that the file was the same name. And it was the same name, but they had miscased it in their import, and it was fun. This is less likely to happen today, especially if you're doing imports where the import's being created automatically. I'm pretty sure, that was a long time ago when we didn't have automatic imports in JavaScript land, and now that you do, the system will do it verbatim the way that it's supposed to. But I don't know, maybe you accidentally manually import a file incorrectly, and this is a good way to make sure that doesn't happen and mess you up. Let's see, so I'm going to delete that one. No omit is there. Yes, module interop is there. Module is the same. Module resolution, bundler versus node. Again, I'm going to leave this one. So specify how TypeScript looks up a file from a given module specifier. I'm going to leave that one because Next.js set that one up. Resolve JSON module. It's the same. Isolated modules. JSX, preserve, incremental. It's true. Paths is the same. So this is, the only thing that we pulled over, which I'm glad I went through it, but the only thing we pulled over was this force consistent casing and file names. So we're going to save that, and then we'll open Tailwind. And Tailwind has all of these configs. So this is all config for theming. I don't think it actually needs that, because Shadcn's already kind of taken care of that in our global CSS, but we'll find out. Keyframes, radix accordion. Yeah, I'm pretty sure all this stuff is handled inside of the Shadcn components. I don't have this Tailwind CSS animate. Let's make sure that it told me to do that. Yeah, so I added that dependency because it told me to earlier. So what we'll do here is we will require Tailwind CSS animate, which I'm pretty sure is like just a CSS plugin for doing animation stuff. This is nice, you know, it gives you the ability to do animations really easily. So I'm going to delete all that. So post CSS config, that doesn't change. Env.local, don't care about that yet. Actually, .env.local doesn't exist, so I'm going to create one. And I'm going to add this here. And you would love to know what my values are. I don't even know yet because I haven't started on it, but we're going to put it here just for when I need it. And I always like to duplicate these, let's see, and call it env.local.example. It just makes it easy when you want to copy things over from env.local into env.local, you know, because this is not version controlled. And as a result, when you create a brand new one, it'll be a blank empty one unless you use Vercel's thing for pulling your environment variables. So again, we'll delete that. Let's see, Supabase, create client. All right, so we're not gonna do that just yet because I haven't set up my Supabase, but I'm gonna have this help me. So I'm gonna close out. I'll leave this one open because maybe we'll need it again. And there's one more components here. So I think when I did create, or I mean, I know that when I did create Next app, it did not do this part. So app.tsx file, let's say underscore app.tsx. Sorry, yeah. All right, so we're gonna create that page, or sorry, that file. It's not a page. I'm not sure why it told me to put that there because I'm not using pages. Font sans. All right, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff here. All right, so layouts. We're just gonna copy pasta this. So it doesn't tell me what to do here. Run npm install, update env.local. All right, I'm just gonna say, I know I can pull all this stuff in. We'll do that in a second. What I wanna do is, all right, I did everything. What next? All of what you suggested for setting up my project. I'm not gonna say what next because I think that will probably be, it's too ambiguous. What I'll say instead is, how do I see it? So it's going to respond with, great, you've set up your project. You can run it locally to see it in action. Here are the steps to view your project. First, make sure you're in your project directory in the terminal. So you can see down here, I'm in the correct place. Go over here and make sure I'm not running anything over here. Okay. Start the development server by running this command. So I'm going to run npm run dev, which opens a new server on the port. So it starts the Next.js development server. Once the server starts, you should see the output in your terminal indicating that the server is running. Typically looks something like this, which is true. It does look something like that. Not quite like that, but it looks something like that. So it says open it and navigate to this. I could have easily clicked on this, which works just fine. And great, global CSS is broken. So you should now see your prompt management MVP application running in your browser. And what did it say the error was? Global CSS. The border class does not exist. What's interesting about this, I think, is that it's also saying here at Tailwind base that that's true. So I think there's a JS and a TS file. Let's delete this JS one. I'm not sure where that one came from. It shouldn't have gotten created. I don't think I created that, but I definitely contributed to it. Let's see. So one thing you can do, install Tailwind CSS and its dependencies. So you can go back through and see that I made this commit. You can also, we can't open it because I haven't pushed it, but let's do this. So I know this is a bad file. I'm going to delete it. You don't need the TS and JS, you just need one. So I'm going to delete the JS one, leave the TS one because we're working in TypeScript. Now everything works the way it's supposed to. I don't know how long it would have taken for someone brand new to have noticed that that was the problem because the error wasn't the error, but that is definitely a thing to check, is if you have files that get created, they don't look like they maybe have the same name and there's two of them, investigate. And that's what we did there, was say there's this JS file, it's garbage, there's this TS file, it looks right. This actually is what Claude had told us to do in this part here with this Tailwind config TS. So if I looked at this and said, oh, I don't know why this is here, I shouldn't have to do this. And then we looked at the JS file and I said, it's not here, so I'm guessing it's working the way it's supposed to. And in fact, it was that JS file was wrong. So, and it should not have been here. So that fixed that. So now we can see that the app is up and running. And this is what you would get with a new Create Next app. It wouldn't usually take this long, I think, for me to get here, but maybe, I don't know. First, again, for someone brand new, if you're just copy pasting stuff across, it'd be very confusing knowing what's working and what's doing what. But as someone who's been doing this for a bit, it was pretty easy to copy pasta things and get it to do what it's supposed to. So now the last thing that I have from this message so far is we've got this app TSX. Go back up here. We've got this layout. So I'm going to just take this layout. Layout is a file that Next.js uses to render a page into this section where it says children. So we'll have a page that'll get injected into this layout. That'll be rendered for us on the page. One really nice thing here is that this is nicely typed, I think. And I could probably refactor some of this stuff, but I don't need to right now. And I might have Cursor do that for me later. So let's see, we have prompt editor. So I'm going to grab this. Where's the path for that? Components prompt editor. So I'm gonna go here, source, components, file, prompt editor.tsx. TypeScript files end in a TS extension. If it's a React TypeScript file, it ends in .tsx. Just a thing to know. Let's see, so we have some type errors. Component definition is missing display name. So let's do this. We have this error. For right now, we're going to use Claude for this, but later I'll show how you could use Cursor, which is the editor that I'm in, this isn't a component, this is a function. Which is interesting because it's, I mean, it's actually, it is the function, but it is the component that's being returned from this use memo. So I'm going to add that there, and then we'll go back to fixing that before I commit my changes. So prompt editor, we're going to go down here to pages index. So this is the home page, pages, this page here. Again, this is, it's not using app directory, it's using the old pages way, so this makes sense to me. But what we're going to do is in the app directory way, you have a page.tsx, and that represents the same thing that index.tsx represented in pages. So I'm going to hit save. It's looking for the layout, and I think it doesn't know where the layout is, and in fact we don't actually need layout here, so, but we do need to wrap this with something. So two things. Layout, again, like I said, in the app directory way, what it will do is it will take the layout, use the layout, put the page into the children, and it'll inject this into there. You can't have a React component that doesn't have a single parent element when you do a return, so that's why I added this, which this is I forget what is it called, component without name React. This, so I'm going to Google for this. I probably could have asked Claude. It's a fragment, so I'll go back here. Say, what is this called in React? So I could get to the same answer, but it's a little more concise, and I could have been a little more descriptive about what I wanted to know. What does it do? And it would have given me a really good answer without me having to go, oh, I'm going to go look at Stack Overflow. In React, syntax is called a fragment, or specifically fragment shorthand. Fragment allows you to group multiple elements without adding an extra DOM node. They're useful when you need to return multiple elements from a component but don't want to wrap them in an unnecessary div or other container. So if I wanted this to be styled, I'd have to wrap it in some other container. But because right now I don't really know what I want to do with it, I'm going to leave it as a fragment. And then if I decide to come back to it, I will add an element. But I think it's better usually when you need to return a component and you don't want it to be styled, or you don't know whether or not you want it to be styled, just start with a fragment, and then you can expand it into the element that you want to use. So I'm going to save that. Now we're going to go to this prompts page. All right, so again, this is like an app directory thing. So maybe what I'll do first, I want you to use Next.13's app directory paradigm. So ideally what this will do is give me probably pretty close to the same stuff, but the difference is it will say, like, instead of pages conversations.tsx, it will be /app/conversations/page.tsx. So I'm gonna send that. We'll see what this spits back out at me. So it's generating app layout, which looks the same. Let's see, app. So this is app page TSX. It's the one I mentioned earlier that we would do prompts page, conversations page, prompt editor, which goes in the component the same way we had it earlier. And what we're gonna do, let's see, source app page, I already did that one. So I'm gonna add prompts page. Go back over here. File prompts page.tsx. So this is one that I find that a lot of people don't know exists in VS Code or Cursor, regardless of which one you're using. They're both using the VS Code editor as the base. If you go in here and you hit new file and I say I want prompts page.tsx, every directory that I create from the beginning to the new file, it will create that directory for me. So in this case, what it's going to do is it's going to create a prompts directory with a pages.tsx file in it. I'm going to go over here, save that one. What's the next one? Conversations. So conversations, new file, conversations, page.tsx. Save that one. And in the prompt editor, let's recopy pasta this one. So I'm gonna grab that again, prompt editor. So one thing you'll notice in the original file, it didn't have that use client up at the top, which this is a directive that Next.js uses to tell the server that it needs to render this particular piece on the client, because what it's going to do by default is attempt to render this page on the server. So it'll render the wrapper on the server, then it will render this prompt editor, which comes from here, on the client. And now I think we are ready to ask it about this error. Oh, there's no good place to put my face in this Loom land. All right, so let's see. Apologize for the oversight. The error you're seeing is likely due to a linting rule that requires components to have a display name. It's good practice for debugging in DevTools, 100%. Let's modify the prompt editor component to address this issue. So it's updated the render element function to have a component called render element. So it's returning component function that returns default element, and it sets the display name on this. And I'm like 90% sure, and let's check. So we'll go over here into our tsconfig. If you remember, we added a no, I don't think it was to tsconfig actually. It was the next config. It was here, this React strict mode. So if we save that, let's see if this still is giving us that error, or is this an ESLint config? ESLint, is that it? That's all the ESLint stuff we have. Where does this come from? React. All right, so this is actually from it's not a TypeScript error. This is an ESLint error. So, which is totally fine. So now what we'll do instead, we'll go back and fix this in a second, and we'll ask, first we'll check to make sure that the layout that I got in this was more correct. First step, let's grab these render element and render relief. These are the functions that are failing. I'm just going to paste these in. And you can see here what it's done is it's created a component. It's given it a display name. Now that particular part is happy. Value here. So let's see, Slate doesn't have a value. Let's do this. Let's grab this error and say, I'm getting an error on my prompt editor for Slate, the Slate component. And it's going to say, oh, I'm sorry for the oversight. Or apologize for the confusion. It does that a lot where it says, oh, sorry, I messed up. So in this case, it takes an initial value. So here are the key changes and explanations. We've added type definitions for custom element and custom text. Let's see over here. So this was on this interface. This prompt editor declare. So we had to declare this module Slate, which is interesting. Specify the structure of our Slate document. We're going to leave that the way it is for now. We've used the module augmentation for Slate to declare our custom types. I think I would rather have this in a different file. Again, you wouldn't probably know to do that. My dogs. Let's ensure that Slate's internal types are aware of our custom element and text structure. So in this case, let's do this. Let's just paste it in just for now, just to see what happens. So I'm gonna do that here, and then I could go copy pasta the imports, but what I did instead was just, you can either back it out and type it, or if I were up here and I do command click, it says update import from Slate React, so this will import that particular component for me. So that part's done. In Slate component, we've changed value to initial value. Slate component in recent versions expect initial value prop instead of value. That's helpful. Initial value. Great. All right, so now you can see this file is happy. If you didn't notice, the reason I knew this was like not working when we're up here is there's this one, which is telling me that there's one problem. I keep pointing at the screen. There's one problem in this file, and then down here you can see this little red spot. That tells me that there's an error here. And what I did was I hovered over it, grabbed the error. It says it does not exist, which I can look at that and see that that's true. And I could also look and see, oh, it takes initial value, so I probably should just use that instead. And then I updated it. So that particular piece is all set. And now if we go back over here, there was one more issue, which is we're missing some tags. And I'm going to explain that in a second. But first, let's look for my TypeScript components. So if this is the updated components for app directory, and layout should have, is there a layout in here? Layout, root layout, here we go. So we're gonna grab this. I'm gonna do for right now, look at this one. So you can see it starts with div, and in app directory, your layout needs to have an HTML element and a body element. Those are required for like any HTML document to render correctly. In the pages way, that stuff was all kind of magically taken care of for the user, or it was taken care of in app.tsx, but that was only if you did an override. In this case, we're going to take what was in this update for the app directory paradigm, and you can see here it's got HTML and body, which is what we'd expect. Now if we go back over here, do a reload, failed to compile because it can't resolve styles. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is go look for source, styles global CSS. So I know that file exists because I was looking at it earlier. So the problem with it is that it doesn't exist in the path that we're looking for it. So it should be /app/global. So now you can see we have a page. It's got this nav bar, get started. I don't know what this is gonna do. All right, so I can start typing my prompt. This is my prompt, sweet. So it's done that. It's not going to save the prompt because we'll go look at that real quick. Save. Where's the save button? So one, it should be, I would think it'd be in here, but I'm guessing it probably put it in prompts page. It did. You can see the button doesn't have any kind of handler on it. So like clicking it's just going to do nothing. If I did const, actually, let's do this. Keep forgetting to use. Sometimes I just do stuff on my own, do stuff myself. So I want to add a handler that can take the prompt when a user clicks the save button and and console login. So we're just going to start with that. The value, and something that I'm thinking about, so I'm looking at this, add functionality that logs in a prompt editor. Curious if it's going to put the handler here. So set current prompt, set current prompt. So one thing I'm not really sure about. If you know anything about React, this prompt editor should be it takes the initial value, so it creates the initial value based on that, and the onChange handler. So on a handle change, it's going to set both of these. All right, so let's just see. Before we do anything, we've got a lot of changes here. So what I'm going to do is update them. So I'm going to say add m.local.example. Add that, hit enter. Next config. I actually don't want this. I liked the way that worked, and I don't need for it to change. So we're going to React strict mode. Oh, save it. Hit plus. Now I'm going to do that. Remove unnecessary Tailwind file. If you remember, that was a JS file we didn't need. Add force consistent casing to TS config. Oh, forgot to add it first. Add it. This sets the font, but also that happens here. I'm pretty sure you don't need this app. Let's go double check. Do I need app.tsx in an appdir context directory context, or is it just the pages context? So again, at Next 13, they change over into this thing called app directory, and you can see like we can put all these files in this app directory. It used to be that with pages, you could only have the page that was going to render. You couldn't have any of its like components next to it, and that was a big change to be able to allow you to say like, in this prompts page.tsx, I want a prompt editor component to live adjacent to this. You couldn't do that in pages. So we're using the app directory here, but also in pages you needed this _app. That was kind of the like alternative to layout. So we're going to delete that. We don't need it. So update layout for app directory. Then let's see, what is this? I'm just going to say add initial components for prompt editor and page. You know what? Let's do, I'm going to unstage all that. I'm going to stage just the prompt editor. I'm going to say add initial component for our prompt editor. Now I'm going to say add initial pages. Now everything is, there's something that's not saved here. Don't need that one. Is that saved? All right, page.tsx. This one, not that one. This one. Save it, and see if there's any changes. Looks like there's no changes, so I'm going to add it. Now everything is staged and committed. So like, you know, I could push this up, and this is what you would be able to do on my prompt MVP project. You wouldn't be able to save it or anything. So we'll go back here, and I was having a conversation with it before I asked about the app directory, and it said, let's see, updated. All right, so this has an update to prompt editor. So one of the nice things about this, like the copy paste paradigm, if you're using version control, is I think, you know, making changes, you make a change, you commit it, and then it's stored in Git. You can then update this file. So I just copy pasted the whole thing over. And you can see here what it's added. So it still took initial value. Now it takes this onChange handler. OnChange handler means that this is a function that's going to run. OnChange is just the name. We could have called it do something, or I don't know, loop, and it would still be a function that runs when you call it. In this case, prompt editor is taking OnChange, and we've created this new function inside of here where it's going to handle the change and then update the value for the handler gets passed in and the value that's inside of here. And then that gets, it updated this to have a display name. Let's see if default editor, yeah, so these that were down here, this default element and default leaf, been moved up here. So this is okay. I feel good about that change. I feel okay about that change. There's some stuff in there that I would change, will change maybe. Then this is the prompt page. And the same thing, I'm just gonna paste this in here so you can see that it's created. You can see that it's created, sorry, I was looking at the time on my Loom and it said 1:20 and now 1:21, and I'm realizing now that's 1 hour and 20 minutes, and I wasn't sure if it wasn't working, so back in. I pasted that in, so these changes, you can see what it's done here. I want to do here. Sorry, Loom hijacks Command-Shift-P, which is what I used to open this palette, but this palette. And then it's like, do you want to cancel your recording? I've been doing this for an hour now, so I do not want to cancel it. But I really wish I could override that, and I can't figure out why I can't, because it looks like you're supposed to be able to in the Loom settings. And even every time I've tried it, it still doesn't override it the way that I want it to. So I'm in my command palette. What was I even doing here? Why did I want to open my command palette? I can't remember. Oh, I see. I remember now. I want to close editors and other groups. We'll save it. All right, I just wanted to close it out so we could look at this single file and not have stuff side by side. So you can see here it's imported useState and descendant. Descendant is a type, and what it's done here, this is the page component. So this is what's wrapping that prompt editor component. And this page component now has some state. That's why it's added use client, because use state is a client hook, and a React hook is basically, it starts with use, and then you can do all kinds of stuff with it around state, or mostly around state and managing state. But if you use a React hook in a page or on a component, it needs to use client, because otherwise it will barf and it'll be like, I can't do anything with that. In fact, we can delete that out, and then we will go over here. We'll refresh this page. You'll see here it says failed to compile. You're importing a component that needs use state. It only works in a client component, but none of its parents are marked with use client. So they're server components by default. And because a page component is as high up as you can get, because this page doesn't have use client, that's why it's failing. So I'm going to save it, go back here, reloads just fine. So it's creating some state here for the current prompt, and the way use state works is this is a tuple, and it always returns the state and a handler. So again, a handler is a function that updates, that does stuff, but in this case, this handler, state handler, always will update the value that is in this tuple, the first value of it. And because it's a function, we call it, and we call it with this initial array of array of object, where it has a type of paragraph and children, which is an array of object with text, which is an empty value. So this is our initial state that we're going to start with. And there's this save handler, and what it's going to do is log current prompt. And when you click the button, it's going to run this. So this will log whatever the value is of current prompt at the time that you click the button. And we're also passing into prompt editor this onChange set current prompt. And what's interesting about this is it's not passing in this initial value to set. Let's see, go right here. We're not actually passing in an initial value to use to instantiate the value of the editor, but it's got a default set on it to always be this, which I think that's okay. At the point that we start saving things and we want to render it in, this won't work anymore because it'll always just be blank. So maybe let's go ask, why did you choose to not pass in initial value for the call to prompt editor? It's probably going to say, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, my apologies. You're right to point that out. I apologize for the oversight. In the previous example, I didn't pass it in, which wasn't the best practice. Let's correct this and explain why we should pass in an initial value. Consistency. That's okay. Ensure that prompt editor and parent components start with the same initial state. I mean, that's true. That's a good thing. Flexibility, that's okay too. I mean, it's nice to be able to have flexibility for that. State management. It gives the parent component control over the initial state of the editor, which is important for managing the overall application. And really, this one's the big one. The most obvious one is that if we saved the prompt that I wrote here, this is a test, this is a test, this is a test. If I saved this into a database and then I reload the page and the state comes from this prompt page component, and it's not passing the initial value in, it's always going to reload like this. So I might have written a really great prompt and then I reload the page and it looks like it's gone, which, you know, as a user is terrifying. It makes you feel really, really bad. So that is the like big thing inside of here, which is, you know, state management, that you can pass in a value, the initial value, which is what we want to do. And it's updated this prompts page. Again, we can just take this, copy it in. I'm going to go to this. This has some of my changes, but I'm going to save it and we'll see what it does. So it pulled the initial value out. I'm going to undo that and see. See, initial value was in line. Now it's pulled it out, which I think is great. I think that works fine. Handle save, set current prompt, handle save. And I think that is still not quite there. If you have never built software before, or if you're unfamiliar with React, you might look at this and be like, oh, that's okay. What I'm going to do over here, because I've worked in React, is say handle save seems like it'd be a good opportunity for a use callback. My apologies. You're absolutely right. It's an optimization. It's a great optimization, especially when passing it as a prop to child components. Although we're not doing that here, it's still good practice. At some point, we probably will. Let's update the prompts page to use callback. Here's what we've changed and why it's beneficial. So it imported use callback, wrap handle save and use callback. This memoizes the function, which means that like if I write A, there's now a value for A. This may be a bad idea because this is going to change a lot. And we can ask Claude what it thinks about that. Anyways, you write A and then you write B. Now it's got two versions. It's got A and B. You happen to back B out. It's going to reuse A. It's not going to rerun everything to get that because it's memoized A when we wrote it. And then again, if you add B, it's also memoized AB. So both of those things are stored in memory in this component. I think in a handle save, it's not that bad because you're clicking on a button every time. If it was inside of a component where you are like typing, every time you type something, it's going to change. So it may not be as useful. But in this case, like, you know, maybe you handle save, you want to use callback. Maybe not. Maybe it's okay without it. definitely future proofs, and its consistency with React Hook's best practices. Use it for functions that depend on state or props, and that's kind of the thing for me is like it does rely on current prompt, which is a state, so it's not a reason not to use it, especially in this case where you're not going to be rerunning every time you type. Back here, we're now passing the initial value in, which we weren't before, and on change set current prompt is also being passed in, which we weren't before before we started making some of these changes. So now prompt editor takes initial value and on change. It has this default in case you don't pass in initial value, but in our case, we're always going to be passing something in. So that will be the value that gets, and this state gets initialized with. And now there's this new change handler where it sets the value for values. This is the state inside of here. And then it also calls on change if there's an on change pass in. That's what this optional chaining, this question mark does, is it says if there is an on change function, we want to call it. If there's not one, it won't attempt to call that function. So this is just a nice convenience, because otherwise we might have had to do something like this instead. If that's there, then on change. So this just makes it, one character instead of a whole new conditional block. And now handle change gets passed in, so we call that on both of these, and initial value is still value, but values initialized with initial value we passed in, and we're passing in enter your prompt here to start with, and at the point we start storing this in the database, the initial value will either be the prompt that the user has written, or if it's a brand new prompt they're attempting to write, it will be this enter your prompt here. So we're going to go over here. I'm going to open the console. Take that to the side. Pull this over here. Close that. So I'm going to write, this is my prompt. Actually, I don't want it to do this initial prompt here thing. There's other ways to do that with Slate. I don't want to do that here though. So I'm going to hit this is prompt. This is prompt. Hit save. You can see here that it renders out saving prompt, and then the prompt as I've changed it. This is new prompt. Hit save prompt again. You can see it's got this new value. So in an hour and a half, we've stood up a local version of a Next.js app with Tailwind, Shadcn, Slate.js. What's really great about this is I think this is a good point for me to stop. So what I can do is I can say, give me a manifest of the work that was done and what you think I should do next. This is going to be used for a new AI assistant prompt. So be sure to, actually, this is going to be used for a new AI assistant prompt along with the prompt I gave you. So please be descriptive and clear about work to be the manifest and the next action. All right, so I've hit this thing where it's like you've done a lot of stuff here, so maybe you should start a new chat, which is convenient because that's the whole reason that I just asked for what I asked for. So you can see here it gave me this response. I'll provide a detailed manifest of the work that's been done, and it's like, here's all the stuff that's been done. I need to go through it, make sure it's what I wanted. And then it's got suggested next steps. And what I'll do this just for now, and then I'll actually go do it again. I'm going to take the manifest of work completed, and then it says here, next immediate action. This is what we want to do. So I'm going to go into Claude. Here is a manifest of the work that's been completed. And where it says next immediate action, I'm going to say, next, I'd like you to help me set up the Supabase integration, starting with authentication. This will provide a value foundation. I actually don't really care about this. Begin by implementing a sign. Yeah, actually, let's keep this stuff here. So I'm going to keep it. I'm going to go back to my very first one, and I'm going to grab this again. I'm going to start a brand new conversation. And the goal of this is like, I want to tell it what we're doing. So it's the first part. I just pasted in what we're doing. I want to tell it what I've done, and then I want to tell it what we're going to do now. So I'm going to hit enter. We'll see what it tells me. Maybe it's like, all right, let's create. I'm going to start doing some stuff. So you can see here, it's creating this Supabase.ts. In my next video, I'll go through how all this stuff works. But it's basically going through and creating the stuff that I've asked it to do. Let's see if it gave me a migration. Yeah, so it gave me a migration to create. It's giving me all the stuff I want. So the hour and 36 minutes that got me here leads me to the thing I really want to talk about real quick, which is I gave very concrete instructions on what I wanted to achieve to help, and ask Claude to help me create the prompt to use for all future AI assistants. And I think that's really important, especially when you are working on a project, or if you're working on a business, or you're working on some larger thing. Being able to have Claude help you create your prompt that always kickstarts your conversation allows you to be consistent, and then being really clear about what you want to do next in a chat helps you be consistent and will help you be able to reach clarity. I mean, it took probably a little bit longer for me to do this part, but what's been really nice about being able to create this way is that now I can go to the next piece, and I'm going through and I'm telling it what I want it to do. I do have the expertise to be able to say, I think we need to go do this piece a little different, or I think this part's not quite right. Can you tell me why you chose to do it that way? But it's gotten me to a state to where I can say, I've done the work for creating this application, and when I get to a stopping point, when it does the thing that I ask it to do, I can ask it, tell me what we just did. Tell me what the next thing I need to do is. I can take the original meta prompt that I created, use that to start a brand new conversation, and take the manifest of the work that was done, the next action to do, put those into a new AI assistant conversation so that it's really tight and focused on that thing I've asked it to do, and it's not trying to use all the rest of the conversation that I had. If I were to say, hey, I want you to now start on Supabase integration here, it's going to send everything that I've talked about to this point in the conversation every time, which is this thing here. Long chats cause you to reach your usage limits faster. We want to reduce the amount of time, or the amount of stuff we're sending to our AI assistant, so that we can increase the amount of stuff that we can have it do, and we don't hit our usage limit faster. So I hope that this was useful in a number of ways. If you are just getting into AI, I hope being able to see how to talk through creating initial prompts that can be reused was helpful. If you're interested in application development for the web, hopefully you learned some things. And then at the very least, it was a lot of fun to be able to just walk through this and have the energy at the end of not having to type out all these things that I will probably go back and make adjustments to, or I might even use my editor, which is an AI native editor, to have it help me modify things that I think need to be better. But overall, I hope that you learned something, and at the very least, it was a lot of fun to watch. Thanks.